welcome back to another episode of
Inside the Message.
We're back with you. So glad to be back with you this Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us here on our premiere episode of Inside the Message. And this is my lovely wife, Reverend Renee, and I am Brother T, and we're your hosts for this episode. And
we're just going to have a chat about Sunday's message, Sunday's inspirational message delivered by the one and only Brother T. And Brother T entitled his message, Trials Without Fear. And it was a really powerful, timely message, in my opinion. And I think what I would like to do is just at this vantage, after having given the message, what's the nugget that you wanted to really hit home with regard to this message?
I guess we've hit them several times already in several of our episodes already, several of our inspirational messages and the conversations we've had here. Mm-hmm. But the takeaway really is that we're the creator. You're creating, there are no victims. And that conversation has been so honored. This conversation about being victimized has been so honored in our society over these last few months and years, actually, that it's becoming a regular vibrational beat, like a sounding that's coming through every time I tune into anything. It's like I can't watch stuff anymore. I can't tune into the news. That's what I'm hearing is people honoring the idea that we're victims, and God didn't create victims. And everything that's happening to us is for our education. I mean, that's what this teaching's about. That's what Jesus taught us. And that we're actually, if we could just get that little nugget, and it's fine, start patting yourself on the back, because whether you like the cake or not, you're the one that baked it, right?
Right.
And be grateful that you were able to manifest all the ingredients necessary. The stove, the fork, the spoon, the sugar, the flour, whatever. You're baking your own cake every day, right? We all are. And yes, it can feel like somebody else's will has more potent, more powerful than ours, but it's not. We are agreeing, we are in alignment with everything that we're experiencing, everything that we're experiencing. People say, oh, well, I don't know that that's true. Well, we joke about, we share a story about a movie that we used to watch called, was a series of TV shows called Lost. And in that series, there was these two characters that amidst all of the drama, they made a choice and they said, we're just going to go over here. And they just left everybody and they just went and lived their life alone and they didn't get involved. So they created their own world in the midst of what it looked like everybody else was creating drama. And they weren't victimized by it. They made the choice to remove themselves from the discussion,
right? From
the drama. And that's the nugget. That's the takeaway, that comes to me. And on the heels of our yet to be decided election, it still hasn't been certified. There are a lot of people, millions of people that are happy and millions of people that are not happy and all of those things. And what I think is important for us to recognize, regardless what your political persuasion is, has nothing to do with it. Regardless of where you find yourself today in that argument, discussion that's out there in the world, we created it. And it's there to teach us something. And that, I think, is really very important, that we begin to take back our power, that we realize that we're the ones that are creating our experiences and we're deciding what we participate in and what we don't participate in. And if we come at it from a place of knowing, because there's a part of us that knows, and we can tune into that, and we call it the holy instant. We practice the holy instant here at True Thought, and it's a teaching of A Course in Miracles. It's really just turning within and connecting with your higher self. And there is a part of us that knows how to help us deal with every trial and helps us to see the educational advantage for our conscious evolution. It helps us to understand why we are manifesting these trials and how we can grow through those experiences.
That's a big nugget, baby.
It kind of is. It kind of is, yeah.
But then it's the same thing that we're teaching truly all of the time. And so I just want to get really real. I want to get super authentic here. And so when I listen to your message, when I hear the concept of trials without fear and the idea that on some level, whether conscious and most often unconscious, I have either made the experiences, made the cake that I am experiencing in life. Sometimes it feels like a flop, sometimes it feels fabulous and tastes great. In either way, without blame, I take responsibility for the way that I am experiencing my life. I take responsibility for how I experience the trials. I may not understand how or why something is in my orbit. And I think this is important because I think that we can get really sidetracked in trying to figure out why on earth I would call a trial into my life. Why on earth would I call a challenge that might be called a sickness or disharmony or a loss? Why would I call that into my life? Why would I create that? And on our human conscious level, we may not have the answer to that. And in some ways, I'm inviting us to just operate on faith that if it's in my vibratory field in some way, shape, or form, it is part of my experience that is for me and not against me. And somehow, in some way, either I have a contract or before I came into this experience, this was something that my higher self or my soul has orchestrated in order for me to have some sort of lesson. And I want to make something really clear. God isn't doing any of this to us.
No.
So none of this is happening to us. So to get real, then I can share my experience of many trials in my life. And I'm going to invite you to think of trials in your lives. And rather than picking something that's recent, pick something from the past, perhaps that is already resolved in your mind. But you can, decades later or a decade later, with maturity, you can look back on it from a safe vantage point and you can see, oh, yeah, had this experience if this experience did not happen, I wouldn't have this golden nugget, this understanding that I have now. An example that I have in my life going back, decades is that there was a rift with my father and myself. And I resented him for something in our family life that happened. And I resented him for a long time. And I remember one of my sisters pulling me aside and saying, you know what, Claudia, if you don't resolve that, if you don't, you're going to be sorry someday. So there was this resentment that I had with my father. And as I went into my 20s, I decided to explore it. And the journey with my dad was a journey of forgiveness. And I had this amazing and unique opportunity to walk through this path with him. And it was such a gift. And it brought us closer together as we worked through this conversation about this situation, as I came to a place of understanding, as I came to a place of being willing to release my judgment of him. And it became a gift. It was a trial that became a gift. And I find it useful that if we can look at the trials of our past and have this idea and this understanding that that somehow in some way they were for us and what was the gift in each one. What is it that I learned, that I gleaned from this unique situation that I might not have come to without it? And so that's a question I have for you. That's a question I think that's important. And then when we can remember that in this way, when we have present day trials, present day challenges, we can lean into the experience that we've had and go, oh yeah, this is going to be okay. I know it's going to be okay. I'm going to pause. I'm going to turn to spirit, and I'm going to activate and even accelerate, because of my awareness and being conscious and intentional, ask spirit to show me what the gift is and what the truth is and how to be in that particular situation.
Yeah. And that's really the pivot. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at lots of things that have happened to us, and the ego is really good at predicting the future and getting it wrong, and looking at the past and connecting dots and saying, oh, why didn't I see that? And it takes control there, and it says, okay, if this comes up again, I'll know how to avoid fear, to avoid chaos, to avoid that situation where I felt like I had to defend myself, whatever the case may be. But it has it can't predict the future. It has no clue. And so it still, we look at what's going on. If we're looking at the world in any regard through the eyes of the ego as a separated mind, which is this experience as human, that we've kind of get aligned with and hypnotized by, that we are indeed separate, and we're not. But as long as we're operating from that, we will always see things from a foundational perspective of fear. So the talk was, facing trials without fear. And at the end of the day, okay, the teaching of True Thought Principles, the reason that we're doing what we're doing and sharing these principles with you, because they were gifted to us and they changed our life, is simply because when you realize that there is a part of your mind that is fearless. It's not the ego being courageous and facing life's tough problems. It's none of that. When you are in that other state of consciousness, you're seeing the world through a different vision, with a different mind. It's literally as bizarre as being asleep at night and having a nightmare and waking up and realizing that nobody was being harmed and nothing was really going on. Dreams have no effect, and you didn't hold anybody guilty for the experience that you had while you were dreaming, even if it was somebody that that was close to you. You can literally wake up the next day after some thought and say to yourself, well, I can forgive you for what you never did. If it's somebody that's close to you that, you dreamed that they did something against you. Because that's really what's going on. When we have that dimensional shift, when we have that shift into a joined state of consciousness, you can't take fear in there. The fearing mind, the fearing self cannot go into that joining. And that's how we can deal with calamity, challenges, and trials fearlessly, because now we're seeing them through a different state of mind.
So a miracle is a sudden shift of perception. It's a sudden shift of perception.
It is.
And so this miracle mindedness and miracle readiness, we can talk about this as the ideal, and yet it can take time for this to actually shift and occur for us. I think it takes practice. I think that it takes practice to, in the midst of our reactions, in the midst of the trigger of fear and fearfulness, in the midst of when it's happening, when I feel myself reacting and judging and emotional, it's not to push those things away, but it's rather to allow it and to notice it and to let it be the signpost to pause and to turn within and to ask for assistance and guidance in how to see something or how to respond, if at all. and just to allow the teacher within the capital T teacher to teach us. And so this conversation sometimes becomes a little challenging because, spiritual teachers want to say the how-to, right? And our how-to is just about the same every time. It's pretty simple. And it is this practice of the holy instant. Some people might call it, a readiness through a prayerful intention.
Meditation.
I can think of it as meditation. Sometimes I come to it through writing and journaling, that in that something shifts for me and something takes over the writing. So there are many ways to access this, but the access point is always the same. It's coming from the joined consciousness and the intention to sidestep the fear, sidestep the ego reaction, notice it, but don't engage from that perspective or from that mind.
Yeah, and of course, the love Jesus says what it takes is willingness, and it's a willingness to hear guidance other than from yourself. And your small self is always no. I got all the degrees, I've got all the documentation, I've got the hard knocks, I've got what I need to know how to make decisions moment by moment to get through this life and deal with these trials. But it does not, because what it does is it just recreates them and they just keep showing up. And that's one of the advantages, that's one of the teachings. Eventually we start to see the patterns. So we go from specific to generalizations. So you're right, it does seem, like I think a lot of people are really looking for, okay, what's the answer? How can I do that? And what the answer is, turn within and find out from the inner guidance, because that's where you'll find the answer. And the answer for us from that inner guidance is always going to be uniquely specific for our situation. So we can't really ask anybody else outside of us, truthfully, because nobody else outside of us really knows.
So I can't Google it.
No.
I can't,
You can
take a poll.
You can get opinions.
Like the pollsters were really messed up, just like, in this election and 4 years ago. The polls don't work, so you can't go and ask everybody. You can't Google it. It's really becoming a time to turn within. A Course in Miracles talks about these patterns reoccurring I have, it talks about it as hallucinations, the trials as actually hallucinations. Now, when you're in the hallucination, it feels real, right? So we're in it and we'll keep having these experiences until we get the lesson or get the purpose of it. And guess what? There's only two possible purposes. And one is, it actually says for sin or for ego or for fear, I'm going to say. And the other purpose is for holiness and to remember our wholeness, our holiness, to remember love. And so it really becomes a benevolent proposition that if I can turn within and say, you know what, I don't understand this. I don't get it. Why is this happening again? And I can ask that question and turn it and offer it to Holy Spirit, offer it to higher self, offer it upon the altar of love and holiness, and let that mind respond and reveal the purpose to us. And that's it.
That is it. I mean, it's simple. As you say, it takes practice. Our teaching says it takes willingness, and it's a discipline, just like anything else. It's a discipline. When we come in, and we're driving down the road, quick example, and things are happening. We're doing 80 miles an hour, and there's an accident up ahead, right? What's our first response? We don't step on the accelerator and go faster. We hit the brake, right? Well, but that's not what the ego does. What the ego does is, if you'll notice, when it's in the middle of a calamity, it speeds up it literally speeds up and it tries to make decisions even faster. But that's exactly the time when we need do nothing. We need to turn within and take that pause. And because we've been practicing and we've been disciplined and we've been patient with ourselves, we can connect with an inner voice that will always give us appropriate guidance. So our suggestion is to tap the brake, slow down a little bit, and turn within. Give yourself some space and some patience, and if it's possible, some quiet. And don't answer the question for yourself. Be willing to hear a new voice. Be willing to be astounded, like a child, innocent and unbelievably curious. What's this for? What's going on? What's really happening?
Yeah.
Right? That's the innocent of a child. A child is willing to be informed and guided. And at some point in our country, especially, we become ruggedly independent and we're supposed to do everything on our own. Well, that's another trick of the ego. It's not required.
Right. So we're going to be so interested in opening this conversation up
with you.
And we're going to do that at 7:30, which is coming up very shortly, Central Standard Time on our Zoom gathering.
At the bottom of the hour here in
tonight. Yeah. So thanks for joining us for this premiere. And this Inside the Message was connected with Brother T's message that aired on or premiered on Sunday, which was November 4th. November 4th. So whether or not you saw that or not, this conversation or not, join us.
And we'll continue this conversation because I think this is, brings up a lot of stuff for a lot of people.
So, maybe share some of the trials that you've had, some of the gifts that you've experienced. We'll be sharing more about our stories and
responding to your questions.
And responding to any questions that you have. And together we encourage one another to wake up and to be mighty companions to one another on this particular journey. We're so grateful that you joined us.
Absolutely.
And anything else you want to say?
No. Stay the course. God bless. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us here at truethought.org. And please hit the like button. If you find value, let it change you. Hit the subscribe button and share this with people. If you find value here, we'd like to share this with more people, and you can be an ambassador for this teaching and for our ministry. And we dearly appreciate you for doing so. Thank you. God bless you.
God bless. Love you.
See you soon. Bye-bye.